hello there.
You control the action.
That's no moon.
Execute Order 66.
Yes, my lord.
There was a period in my childhood where everything was centered around Star Wars. For years in a row, every birthday and Christmas present I wished for was Lego Star Wars. I watched the movies and Clone Wars religiously, and I read tons of books about the lore. Even in my adolescence, the franchise stayed very important to me. So you would think that I would be the perfect target audience for all the new Star Wars content published by Disney. You know, I have the knowledge about the universe and I really cared about the characters. But when it comes to everything Star Wars related that was put out after 2012, I don't care. Maybe I cared back when the new trilogy was put out, but especially since the rise of Skywalker,
Somehow Palpatine returned.
all the importance that this franchise once had to me just kinda vanished. The reason for that is obvious. Star Wars isn't great anymore. It's just content. But in this video I don't want to talk too much about the new Star Wars stuff. Instead, I want to look back at Star Wars Legends. For those of you who don't know, there are two different Star Wars universes with their own different timelines. That's because when Disney bought Lucasfilm in 2012, they declared that every Star Wars media, except for the movies and TV shows, wouldn't be canon anymore in order to make room for new stories. I understand why they did that from their perspective, but the problem was that the classic Star Wars, which is now called Star Wars Legends, had such a great world building and fledged out universe before, between and after the movies, that the bar for the new Disney world building was set very high. At least that's how I remember it. So yeah, in this video I want to look back at this old universe and find out whether it was actually great or if it's just my childhood nostalgia.
And now,
The era of the Old Republic was always fascinating to me. I never actually played the games, but in my teenage years I discovered this part of the original Star Wars timeline through YouTube videos. There's just something so freaking cool and creative about this time period, and to me it leads back to one key factor in which the Old Republic is different to everything that came after it. It's the Sith. Back then, the famous rule of two, which says that there can only be two Sith Lords, didn't exist. This means that instead of one main plotline that decides the fate of the galaxy, the way it is in the movies, you can have an unlimited pool of storylines between different original Jedi and Sith that can all happen simultaneously and have an equal amount of weight to them. I would describe it as a much more unleashed and scaled up version of Star Wars, which definitely fits great with a video game setting. Regarding this time period, I feel like I only have to take one look in order to say, hell yeah, this was indeed great. And I really don't think that's just my nostalgia. Of course, there are probably some mediocre books or comics that were published for this time period. In general, I don't want to defend every single thing that is Legends related, but I'm pretty sure that the overall majority of stories, ideas and characters that took place in this setting were awesome. I especially remember badass Sith Lords like Darth Nihilus, who could destroy entire planets, and terrifying events like the fall of the Jedi Temple. Anyway, there's one story in particular that I wanna briefly talk about. The Darth Bane trilogy. Darth Bane is the connecting piece between the Old Republic and the main Star Wars plot, because he was the Sith who implemented the rule of two. His story, which is told in 3 amazing books, is therefore also the grand finale of the Old Republic era. And if there's one thing you should check out for yourself if you're interested in the Old Republic, it's that. I really don't want to spoil or anything, and I don't think I need to. Just think about how epic a story must be in which one Sith Lord gets rid of every other Sith while simultaneously hating the Jedi. Even if you don't care about Star Wars at all, I would still recommend these books. As already said, I was a huge fan of the original trilogy, the prequels and Clone Wars as a child. For this video I tried to determine one simple reason that can explain why Star Wars resonated so much with me back then, but I don't know. It's tough. Maybe it's because of the simple narrative structure the movies had, or maybe it's because of how unlimited and fun this world looked. Or maybe it's just because I started to get interested in guns and explosions. I'm actually not quite sure. It could be the combination of all these things. Whatever it was, it still works for me. Of course you can criticize some elements and narrative choices, especially when it comes to the prequels. But even with that in mind, the characters and their relationships just worked. In retrospective, Star Wars was kind of like an epic soap opera everybody could enjoy, since the characters were just very compelling.
He's my brother.
Anyway, I definitely couldn't get enough of this universe for a very long time. But that was fine because there was infinite Star Wars related content surrounding the movies. I had video games, lore books, comics, lots of stuff that is now considered legends. But to be honest, when I look back on all of that, I have to admit that nothing really stayed stuck in my head. Except for two things. I remember that the General Grievous backstory was pretty interesting. And, as far as I recall, Ki-Adi-Mundi was one of the few Jedi who was allowed to procreate because the male to female ratio of the species was 1:20. For real. That's basically all I can remember about the Legends lore surrounding the movies. So looking at Rogue One and Rebels, I think I would actually give this point to the Disney canon. It seems like they made more out of this time frame than Legends did. Huh. Could the same thing be said about what came after the original saga? The newest trilogy was a giant shitshow in every regard. The fandom became super toxic, the movies lacked any kind of vision or plan, and it felt like the essence of Star Wars was completely lost. I think the worst mistake was that these movies devalued Luke, Han, Leia, and everything they accomplished in the original trilogy, only to tell a recycled and much worse version of their story. It's such a weird trend in modern movie making that studios think it's a good idea to bring back old icons only to present them as weak, lonely alcoholics that need to be saved by the new protagonist. I don't think most people hated Rey or the new female protagonist in Indiana Jones 5, for example, because they were women. I think the real problem was that it feels incredibly disrespectful to diminish the growth and integrity of beloved characters in order to create conflict and highlight the qualities of the new young protagonist.
This hyperdrive blows are going to be pieces of us in 3 different systems.
This is so incredibly stupid that I find it kind of funny. These billion-dollar companies kill all their billion-dollar franchises with bad writing decisions. It all comes down to that. So I'm actually really glad that the Star Wars I loved isn't the Star Wars they killed. Disney can do whatever they want with their new canon. I've completely moved on from caring about franchises in general. But I'm still glad that the universe my childhood self loved so much is safe and unharmed. Star Wars Legends was truly great. And that's especially true for the lore that came after the original trilogy. The Thrawn trilogy, which takes place a few years after the fall of the Empire, is a great example for this. Instead of tearing down old characters and their accomplishments, It's a natural continuation of their story. You have a completely original antagonist, new planets and alien races, politics, everything that makes Star Wars great. After that came the story about Han's and Leia's 3 children fighting a new Sith threat. And then you had the Yuuzhan Vong, an alien race from another galaxy that fought with organic weapons and spaceships and were able to crash moons into planets. That's creativity, originality, and fun. All the things that Disney's Star Wars lacks completely, in my opinion.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Anyway, thanks for watching. I hope it became clear why I appreciate the old Star Wars, even though I don't care about franchises anymore. Feel free to share your thoughts on all of this, and have a nice day.